Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're really diving into something kind of heavy today, but so important for anyone who's dealt with, long-term trauma.
Yeah.
Um, Finding a therapist for CPTSD.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
you might have heard that term CPTSD before, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, but actually finding the right person to help you with that can feel impossible.
It is.
So
Yeah.
that's what we're hoping to do today. Like, how do you even start?
Right.
So maybe you could start by explaining for people, like, what makes CPTSD different? Because I think some people listening might think, well, isn't it just like being really sad or like, having anxiety?
Right.
And those are some of the components, but it runs so much deeper.
It changes the way that you think, the way that you feel, how you connect with other people. Really, it impacts your whole view of yourself, even just your view of the world.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's almost like, when there's an earthquake, you have that initial earthquake.
Right.
It's kind of like the aftershocks of that earthquake that just keep rippling out.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you're not just treating like the symptoms, you're treating like the core of what's going on.
Right. And it's so deep that sometimes you don't even recognize it.
Right.
It's invisible.
And that's where the specialized treatment comes in.
Exactly.
Because you can't, just put a Band-Aid on something that needs like a whole, new foundation.
It's true. And traditional therapies, like I know a lot of people are familiar with CBT,
Yeah.
which is super effective
Yeah.
for a lot of people. But with CPTSD, it sometimes just doesn't really address kind of the root of the problem.
Okay.
So think about it this way. Like with CBT, you're really focused on like the present moment
Okay.
thoughts and feelings.
Right.
But with CPTSD, sometimes you really need to address like those deep-seated belief and emotional patterns that have really become ingrained over time because of the prolonged trauma.
It's almost like CBT is like repainting a house,
Yeah,
but if the foundation's messed up,
right.
you've got to fix that first.
Exactly. You have to fix the foundation before you can even think about paint colors.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like with CPTSD, you're going in and you're fixing the foundation first before you can even worry about the paint. Wow. Okay. And, for our listener, if you've tried therapy before and you're like, it's not working or something's missing, this might be why.
Exactly.
Because you're not getting down to that foundational level of healing.
Right. Yeah, and I've seen that firsthand in my own practice. I worked with someone, let's call her Sarah. She was experiencing a lot of really intense anxiety because she had gone through, years of emotional abuse.
Right.
And, we tried traditional CBT. We were focusing on, okay, let's manage your anxious thoughts. How are you feeling right now? But the relief was always temporary.
Okay.
It wasn't until we dug a little bit deeper and we addressed the actual trauma.
Right, yeah.
That's when we saw like real change and real healing begin.
Oh, yeah. And so with her, was it like the trauma of the abuse had impacted how she saw herself?
Yes. Her sense of self, her safety in the world, like all of that was really impacted by that trauma.
It really highlights why specialized treatment is so important.
It is.
But what does that look like for the person going through it?
Right. So it's about recognizing how CPTSD is impacting you specifically.
Okay.
Because it's not one size fits all.
It's like those ripples we were talking about.
Right.
Like each ripple is a way that CPTSD is like, hey, I'm messing this up for you.
Exactly. It
Right.
affects your relationships. It affects, like you said, how you see the world, everything.
Right.
And so specialized treatment acknowledges those ripples.
Yeah.
Like, let's say, for example, you're really struggling with setting boundaries because of past trauma. A specialized therapist is going to be able to help you understand how those past experiences are impacting you right now,
Okay.
and then give you the tools to build those healthy boundaries.
So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, that's me, it can impact everything.
Right.
Your emotions, your sense of self, your relationships, how you see the world.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about understanding how the trauma has like woven itself almost into like who you are.
Right.
And then creating a treatment plan that helps you to kind of untangle all of that.
Okay. So let's say, you're at the point where you're like, okay, I need to find somebody
Right.
who gets this.
Yeah.
It can feel overwhelming to even know where to start.
Right. And I hear that all the time. Where do I even begin?
Right. Like where do you start?
It can be tough. I've been there, trust me. Even as a therapist, trying to find someone for myself can feel like, trying to find a needle in a haystack.
All right.
So it's
And
hard.
it's easy to get discouraged.
Right.
But don't give up. Like, finding the right person is possible.
Yes.
It's worth it. So, okay, what questions should our listener be asking? Like,
Yeah.
if you're calling therapists, what are some things you should be asking them about CPTSD specifically?
So it's more than just seeing like CPTSD listed on their website.
Right.
You want to go a little bit deeper.
Okay.
So you can ask them like about their specific training
Okay.
in trauma-informed approaches. Have they worked with a lot of clients
Okay.
with CPTSD specifically?
And is there a certain kind of training that's better than another? Or is it just more like, have you done the work?
Right. It's more about like, have you done the work?
Okay.
But definitely ask about their approach.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I know a question that I think a lot of survivors have is, do you need to find a therapist who's also a survivor?
That's a really personal decision. And honestly, there's no right or wrong answer there.
Right.
Some people, they find a lot of validation and connection when they work with someone who really, truly gets it.
Right. Like they've been there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like speaking the same language.
Right. Exactly.
But it's important to remember that a therapist, they don't have to be a survivor themselves to still be really effective.
Yep.
It's really about, do they have the knowledge? Yeah. Do they have the empathy and that ability to create a safe space, a validating space? Because I've met some incredible therapists who maybe they haven't walked that exact same path, but they're so compassionate and understanding.
Right. It's like they can hold space for that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And another thing to think about as you're kind of like going through this process is, does the therapist specialize in the specific type of trauma that you've experienced?
Oh, okay. So, like, if you experienced narcissistic abuse,
Exactly.
you would want to find someone who gets that.
Exactly, because they're going to understand all the nuances
Right.
of that specific type of trauma, the gaslighting, the manipulation,
Right.
all of that often comes with narcissistic abuse.
The impact it has on your self-worth.
Exactly.
Wow.
So it's almost like they know the terrain a little bit better.
Oh, I like that.
Right. They can kind of anticipate, some of the challenges.
Right.
And help you to navigate them.
Yeah, because it's like with any kind of trauma, there's the trauma itself,
Right.
but then there's all of the ways that it like warps your thinking.
Yes.
And so you need someone who understands how that particular thing warps your thinking
Exactly.
to help you untangle that.
Yes, exactly.
Wow. Okay. That is such a good point. And it actually makes me think about something else that's so important, which is the relationship with the therapist.
Yes.
Like, it's not just about, do they have CPTSD on their website? Like, it's more than that.
It's so much more than that. That
Wow.
relationship is huge.
Right.
It is the foundation for everything. So, think about it like building a house again. You can have the best blueprints, the best contractors.
Right.
But if that foundation is shaky,
Right.
the whole thing is compromised.
Right. Oh, I love that. So it's not just like their credentials. It's, do you feel it when you're with them?
Yes. Do you feel heard, seen,
Validated.
respected?
Yeah.
Like, do you feel safe enough to be vulnerable, to share your deepest fears
Right.
without being judged?
Right. And I think that's a really good point, because with CPTSD so often, you're dealing with shame.
Yes.
You're dealing with like feeling not safe.
Yes, a lot of fear.
Yeah. So to go into a space with a therapist and feel that again would be re-traumatizing.
Exactly.
So you really do need to feel that safeness.
Yeah, it's in that space of like genuine connection and trust that the real healing can happen.
That makes a lot of sense. Do you have any tips for, like, if someone's listening and they're like, okay, but how do I know? Like, what questions can you even ask to figure that out?
Yeah, sometimes it's just you get a sense from them.
Right.
But a good question to ask is, how do you work with someone who feels deeply misunderstood or unseen?
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Because it's getting to that core wound
Exactly.
with CPTSD.
It's like, are you able to create that space?
That's such a good question.
Yeah, and their answer will really reveal a lot
Right.
about whether or not they can actually hold that.
Okay, that's great. So we've talked about what to look for, but what about red flags? Because I think that's huge too.
Yeah.
Like, what should people be watching out for? Because not every therapist is a good fit.
Right. And it's important to recognize those warning signs.
Right, yeah. Sometimes it's easier to know what you don't want
Exactly.
than what you do want.
Yes. Huge red flag is a therapist who dismisses the impact of your trauma
Oh, yeah.
or minimizes it.
Yep.
If they say things like, get over it,
Uh-huh.
or that was a long time ago,
Yep.
huge red flags.
Like, run.
Yeah, those are signs that this is not the right fit for you.
Yeah, it's like they're invalidating your whole reality.
Yes.
All those years you lived feeling that way.
Yes.
Yeah. And if you're listening to this and you've experienced that, it's not you.
It's not your fault.
Yeah.
Another red flag is a therapist who pushes you to do exposure therapy before you're ready.
Right.
Trauma-informed therapy, it's about pacing.
Okay.
It's about going slow and working through those layers at a pace that feels safe for you.
So you're in the driver's seat.
Exactly.
It's not like being forced to do something that you're not ready for,
Exactly.
which I think can be a risk with any kind of therapy.
Yes.
But especially with CPTSD.
Yes, absolutely. And another thing to be wary of is a therapist who doesn't really seem to understand like emotional flashbacks.
Right. Because those aren't always visual.
Exactly.
Right.
With CPTSD, they can bring back all those those icky feelings.
Right. You're right back there in that moment.
Yes. The fear, the helplessness.
So if you're experiencing that with a therapist
Yeah.
and they're not acknowledging it, that's a sign.
Yes, definitely. You want a therapist who understands that and can help you to navigate that.
Right.
Because it all comes back to that feeling of safety,
Right.
being able to be vulnerable and open up. And it can be a long process,
Right.
finding the right therapist.
Yeah. And it can be emotionally draining,
It can.
especially on top of everything else you've been through.
Right.
So what advice would you give to someone who's listening and they're just like, I can't. Like, this is too much. I'm done.
It's okay to feel that way.
Yeah.
It really is. It can be really disheartening. I always tell people, like, giving up on finding the right therapist is almost like giving up on yourself.
Right.
And you deserve so much more than that.
Yeah. You really do. It's, like you said, it's that missing puzzle piece.
Yes.
That when you find it, everything just kind of clicks into place.
It's an investment in
Yeah.
your healing and your well-being.
It really is. And, it's like with anything else, you don't just buy, like, the first pair of shoes you see.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you try things on.
You gotta find the right fit.
Yes. You got to find the right fit. And sometimes it takes time, but
And that's okay.
yeah.
And you're not alone. Remember that.
Right.
Like, there are so many resources out there. You've got online directories, maybe there are some support groups.
Right.
Even just asking your friends and family.
Right. Word of mouth.
Exactly, if they have recommendations.
And sometimes, honestly, just talking about it
Yes.
helps you figure out what you need.
It does.
Yeah. You mentioned something earlier, though, that I thought was really powerful, which is that sometimes you see someone who finds the right fit,
Yes.
and the transformation is incredible.
It is. It's amazing to witness. I had a client that I worked with. I mean, she had seen so many therapists. She was like ready to give up. She
Yeah.
felt like nobody understood her.
Right.
And but she kept searching, and finally she found somebody who just like got her.
Whoa.
They clicked. And seeing her transformation, I mean, she started believing in herself again.
Wow.
It was amazing.
That's incredible. Yeah. It's like a reminder that even when you feel like giving up,
Yes,
that person's out there.
they are.
Yeah. So to our listener, if you're feeling discouraged, hold on to that hope.
Please.
Remember what we talked about today? Ask the questions.
Yeah.
Trust your gut. Don't be afraid to walk away if something doesn't feel right.
Yes, you are your own best advocate.
Exactly.
Don't forget that.
Yeah. You are in charge of your healing journey.
Yes,
And finding the right person to support you on that journey is huge.
absolutely.
Well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk about this today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us for this deep dive on finding the right therapist for CPTSD. We know it's a tough topic,
It is.
but it's so important. And just remember, you're not alone in this. Keep searching, keep believing in yourself, and keep embracing that incredible strength that you have. Until next time, take care.